Welcome to Bloor Central, friends. My name is Doug Hammond. Over the past number of weeks, we have been posting these lessons. We've been going through the Serenity Prayer. It's a prayer that is known very well in many recovery groups, but we have been actually praying it through as a congregation, and we've been asking for three things. First of all, that you would pray the prayer each day to the best of your ability to present the words of this prayer to God. Secondly, that you would review it several times a day. Put it in a place where you can review it easily, on a fridge or on a dashboard or in a wallet. You just pull it out. We really want you to invite the prayer into your day. And then lastly, we're asking you to each week be discussing something that you've experienced in the prayer, maybe something that you've learned or something like that. And we've really been having a wonderful time. We are using this prayer as a tool to help us create lives in which God's peace can grow. We do believe that God gives us peace, but that peace comes as a seed. And so we're suggesting that the Serenity Prayer is simply a tool that helps us to create the conditions through which that prayer, that seed of peace can grow in our lives. So I want to start this week with the Serenity Prayer. I'm just going to read you the words. And this week, we are dealing with the phrase, to be reasonably happy in this life. Just pray with me, though. Let's go through the prayer together. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. Taking as Jesus did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that you'll make all things right if I surrender to your will so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy to you forever in the next. Amen. So the Bible reading that we read along with that prayer on Sunday, and again, this is Sunday, March 22nd, this past Sunday, we read from Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I'm just going to read a few verses from there. There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. So this issue of happiness, this second last line of the Serenity Prayer says, that I may be reasonably happy in this life. Now, for some people, happiness is something that is really difficult to comprehend. We spoke about it last week that many of us have different expectations around happiness, different ways in which we define it. The dictionary defines it a certain way. We're not even sure the writer of the prayer, what his understanding of happiness was. So we were exploring that this past week. And really, we came to the conclusion that it's so difficult to have a precise definition of what happiness is. But this is what we've come up with, that happiness is actually the positive emotions and the life satisfaction that gives us the capacity to carry on in fulfilling God's purpose for life. Basically, it is the positive emotions and the life satisfaction that give us the strength and the courage and the will to get up and to just keep going. We really came to look at happiness almost as like a bank account. If I've got enough money in the bank, if I've got $1,000 in my bank account and I go to take out $500, I've still got money in the bank. I'm still in good standing with the bank. However, if I have, no money in the bank and I go and try to take out $500, well, that means I'm actually in the red, and the bank probably is not going to respond to that. In a similar way with happiness is that, we experience life, and again, the positive emotions and life satisfaction that we get actually are like little deposits that we get in this, emotional bank that we have, this happiness bank. And as long as we are above zero, we can cope with life. But sometimes something happens and we get knocked down and we end up in the red. And what the Serenity Prayer is talking about is that if we are to follow along with the principles of this prayer, we can be reasonably happy. That means that we can have enough positive emotions and life satisfaction that we can keep coping with life, that we can keep going forward, fulfilling our responsibilities, living out our purpose. The big problem comes when we start expecting that happiness is going to be everything good, nothing ever bad again. Some people expect of happiness that eventually we get to this point where we live happily ever after. We never experience sadness anymore. And as we look through this today, I think we're going to understand that that's really not reasonable. You know, the whole way to look at happiness that we have been talking about last Sunday was really this idea of God gives us what we need to be able to get through each day. The positive emotions and life satisfaction, we can get enough so that we can cope, so that we can keep going in the world. You know, I want to acknowledge that, you know, there is all this confusion about happiness, but we can expect, if we are practicing our conscious contact with God and fulfilling the principles of this prayer, we can come to the point where we have what we need to carry on. You know, there are some misunderstandings about happiness that I've already hinted at. But before we and I want to look at those, but the one thing that I do want to say, there are some things that we know about happiness. First of all, did you know that happiness is on the decline in Canada? Last week in CBC News, they actually had an article on the World Happiness Report. And each year, these people rank what countries are the happiest. Canada's happiness ranking is dipping each year. Since 2005, when we were ranked number 5 in the world, we've slipped down now to 18. So we're seeing a decline in the happiness that people are expressing or how they understand it in Canada. Even with that, we recognize that many people expect to be happy. People say, I just want to be happy. Can't I be happy? Is that too much to ask? We hear in conversations with people quite often, there's an expectation, even though happiness seems to be harder and harder to find in our country, people have this expectation that they will find happiness. The last thing that we know, before I get into the misunderstandings around happiness, the last thing we know is that God knows what is best for us. I came across this verse last week. It says this in Isaiah 48:17. I am the Lord your God who teaches you what is best for you, who directs you in all the ways you should go. So we're starting off at this point, believing that God knows what will make us happy. He knows what we need to be happy. We all seem to have this expectation that we are going to be happy, and yet in our country, we're seeing a continual decline in people who are recognizing happiness as part of their lives. Now, I just want to go over some of the misunderstandings of happiness, and I think I've got 4 here, but 1 and 2 kind of go together, and 3 and 4 also go together. Let me go through them really quickly. First of all, one of the misunderstandings with happiness, people seem to believe that happiness is kind of out there somewhere. Happiness is in their outer world, and they have to go look for it. You know, they think if I go and if I can make more money, or if I can get a better job, or if, something's going to happen that will help me to find happiness. It's out there somewhere. The second misunderstanding is that some people feel, well, maybe happiness is in me. I've just got to learn how to bring it out. I've got to learn how to think positively, or I've got to learn how to, relate to people better so that I can actually draw this happiness out. They believe that happiness is in their inner life. So 1 and 2 kind of go together, that people are looking for happiness in some place, either in their outer life or in their inner life. The third one is, some people feel that in order to be happy, their world has to be perfect. In actual fact, if there's anything wrong in their lives, there's no way that they can recognize anything happy in their life. You can say, are you happy? Well, how can I be happy when I'm failing geography, or when I'm how can I be happy when I don't like my job? We might be experiencing positive emotions and life satisfaction in many, many different areas of our lives. But some people, even when there's one thing wrong, that unless their world is perfect, they do not believe that they can experience happiness. Other people, and this is very similar, number 4, happiness is an all or nothing condition. You're either happy or you're not. And so these 4 kind of misunderstandings really shape the way we think about happiness. And as a result, some people assume they're not happy, even though they have lots to be happy about, but they make these assumptions that really send them in the wrong direction. I want to deal with these. So these 4 misunderstandings around happiness, I just want to address them really quickly. First of all, 1 and 2. We said 1 and 2 were people go looking for happiness either in the outer life or in their inner life. But the scripture tells us that happiness is found in God. I really want to stress that. It says this in Romans 15:13. So I pray for you Gentiles, that the God who gives you hope and will keep you happy and full of peace as you believe in him. We recognize that God is the source of all things good, and that includes happiness. It actually says as well in James 1:17, every good and perfect gift is from above. So what we want to suggest to you is people who are looking for happiness in their outer or in their inner lives, they're looking in the wrong place. And so no matter how hard they look, no matter what conditions they change in their inner or outer life, we don't believe that they can find the happiness that God wants for them. God is the source of all things good. The second thing, which says, you're either going to be happy or you're not. You're either going to be 100% happy or you're going to be unhappy. But we have to recognize that in this world, we sometimes have to do unhappy things. Our world is filled with challenges that really cause us to go through times where we're not going to be experiencing happiness. Sometimes we have to confront evil. Sometimes we have to sort out a disagreement. Sometimes we have to deal with pain or loss or failure. Sometimes we have to go to the dentist. These are all experiences which are necessary for us to deal with, but they're not going to be bringing us happiness. So to think that we're going to be happy all the time is simply not realistic. That's not playing, that's not understanding how the world works. We need to recognize that there are things that are not happy. In the passage that we read earlier from Ecclesiastes, it tells us there's a time for everything. There is a time to weep, and there's a time to laugh. Even when we are dealing with pain and loss and failure, we can still experience enough happiness. Even though we're not in happy situations and we're not feeling 100% happy, hopefully we have, as again with a bank account, we've got enough in our bank account so that we can draw on the reserves. That yes, we're not experiencing happiness right now, but we've had enough emotional, positive emotions and life satisfaction that we can still maintain a healthy balance in our lives. Expecting to be supremely happy is simply not acknowledging the world we live in. God gives us plenty of opportunity to find the happiness for us that we need so that we can prosper in this world. Let me just review. I'm hoping I can draw this out a bit as I kind of review a little bit about what we've been doing in the Serenity Prayer over the past number of weeks. I want to suggest to you that we can recognize it through this prayer. There are signposts. There are signposts through this prayer that actually point us to being reasonably happy. For example, a few weeks ago, we said that we are praying to enjoy one moment at a time. we noted that even when we're having a bad day or a bad week or even a bad year, there are still gifts that God sends us, those things that we can still enjoy even though we're having a bad day. Things don't work out, but we do have opportunities to, have other options. We do not need to say, simply because we're having a bad day doesn't mean that, there's nothing to enjoy. A bad day, we can still have good things happen to us in bad days. We said that, in order to prepare yourself for that, there were three things. When we spoke about this a few weeks ago, enjoying one moment at a time, there are three ways you can do that. Learn to live your life with purpose. Purpose has been so much a part of understanding the peace in our lives. So living out the purpose that God has for you can protect you, can give you joy in the middle of a bad day. Also, being thankful. 1 Thessalonians 5, 16, 17, giving thanks always. We talk a lot about giving thanks. And again, giving thanks helps us to pay attention to those things around us, even during a bad day. And the last thing, remember that we are going to die. Remember that each day we have on this earth is a gift. Hebrews 9:27 says, just as people are destined to die once, and after that face judgment. We are all going to die. And that's not necessarily something to cheer you up, but just to recognize that this day is a gift, and we need to be grateful for it and enjoy it. There are so many different ways in which we recognize through this prayer that we can enjoy what has been given us today. We also said previously in the prayer, we consider accepting hardship as a pathway to peace. To insist that our lives are going to be filled with 100% happiness trains us to avoid those unpleasant but necessary events in our lives. There's a time for us to tear down and a time for us to mend. We know that we have to go through hardship because as we do that, we find on the other side, we find the peace that God desperately wants for us. So there's these signposts as we go through the prayer that point us towards a reasonable happiness. Just in closing, I'd like to, I'd like to suggest we can more deeply understand how to experience happiness. It's not a destination. Happiness is not a place that we arrive at. Happiness is a byproduct. To illustrate this, I found this quote from Henry Thoreau, and he says this: happiness is like a butterfly. The more you chase it, the more it will evade you. But if you notice the other things around you, it will gently come and sit on your shoulder. Really interesting observation that Henry Thoreau makes, that so many times happiness is not something that you will find if you look for it. There's something so mysterious about it that way. But what we have learned through the Serenity Prayer is that God is a source of happiness. So as you seek after God, the byproduct of seeking after God will be happiness. What's the takeaway here? Don't seek after happiness. Seek after God. Don't seek after God so that you can find out. It's like literally just focus on seeking God. Hebrews 11 verse 6 says, without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. There is an absolute promise here that as we seek God, he does reward us. And one of the things he rewards us with is happiness, positive emotions, life satisfaction as we seek God. It is in our drawing close to God that we recognize it's like the butterfly landing on our shoulder. We begin to experience happiness. I wanted to just close with one other observation and just want you to recognize the sequence of these lines. The sequence of these lines in the prayer are not accidental. And even if you just take these last three lines that lead up to, or these two lines that lead up to the mention of reasonable happiness. First of all, it says, trusting you'll make all things right. This is the line we did 2 weeks ago, and we said that trust is the foundation of all prayer. We don't trust in the prayer. We trust in the God we're praying to. So trusting that you will make all things right. The next line says, if I surrender to your will. And last week, we said that surrender was the actual work of prayer. Some people think that prayer is the work of prayer. But in actual fact, it is us surrendering to God's will in our lives in an ongoing and ever-changing way. We are continually surrendering to your will. So when you put trust and surrender together, what is the response? It's happiness. The sequence there, from trust to surrender, resulting in happiness, it's not an accident. It's not a coincidence. We believe that supreme happiness comes next week when we come into a full relationship with God. But right now, in these moments, as we trust God that he will make all things right in our lives, if we surrender his will, that we will find reasonable happiness in this life. God bless you.